Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Open the door.
Officer, it's midnight. Can I see your warrant, please?
I don't answer to you. You answer to me. Open the door now.
I'm an American citizen. What's your probable cause?
You must provide documents upon request by a federal agent.
That's not accurate. Under the Fourth Amendment...
Shut up! I can arrest you right now.
Agent Raymond Corbin had been with ICE for 6 years when he made a decision at midnight that would cost him everything: his career, his reputation, and help trigger a $6.7 million federal lawsuit. He was pounding on the door of a registered nurse who'd just finished a 12-hour trauma shift, demanding citizenship papers without a warrant or probable cause. The doorbell camera captured every word in perfect clarity. Her hand rested calmly on the security chain. His hand moved toward his gun. What Corbin didn't know, standing there under the porch light making threats, was that he wasn't intimidating a victim. He was recording his own professional execution. Tina Sanders's scrubs still smelled faintly of antiseptic as she pulled into her driveway just past midnight. 14 years as a critical care nurse at Atlanta Memorial Hospital had taught her to function on little sleep. But tonight's 12-hour trauma shift had been particularly brutal. 3 car accident victims, 2 cardiac arrests, and a gunshot wound that required her to hold compressions for 20 minutes straight while the surgical team prepared the OR. Her home in Cascade Heights represented everything she'd worked for. The modest 2-bedroom house sat on land her grandmother's family had purchased in 1962, a tangible piece of history passed down through 3 generations. The doorbell camera she'd installed after package thefts had seemed like a minor security upgrade at the time. It would prove to be the most important purchase of her life. She barely had time to set her keys down when the pounding started. Through the door, she heard a man's voice, sharp and commanding. "Open the door. Immigration and Customs Enforcement." Tina's exhaustion evaporated, replaced by something colder. She'd spent the last 2 years volunteering with the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, learning immigration law, constitutional rights, and the precise boundaries of federal authority. This didn't feel right. "Can I see your warrant, please?" she called through the closed door, her voice steady. "I don't need to show you anything. Open this door right now." The doorbell camera captured everything in crystalline clarity. Agent Raymond Corbin's tactical vest, emblazoned with ICE in bold letters, his aggressive stance, the way his hand rested near his sidearm. What it also captured was his face when Tina opened the door with the security chain latched, the immediate frustration of a man accustomed to fear, confronted instead with calm resistance. Corbin had spent 6 years with ICE, the last 3 in Atlanta. His personnel file contained 17 complaints, all dismissed. He'd built a career on assumptions and intimidation, conducting unauthorized community sweeps in Black and Hispanic neighborhoods, operating under the belief that authority alone was sufficient justification. He had never encountered anyone like Tina Sanders. Tina studied the man through the narrow opening permitted by the security chain. His face was flushed. Whether from exertion or anger, she couldn't tell. Behind him, the quiet, suburban street lay empty, streetlights casting long shadows across manicured lawns. "I'm an American citizen," she said, her voice carrying the same measured tone she used when explaining procedures to panicked family members in the ICU. "I was born in Decatur." "What is this about?" Corbin stepped closer, filling the doorbell camera's frame. "I'm conducting an investigation. I need to see your identification and proof of citizenship. Right now." Every instinct told Tina this was wrong. Federal agents didn't conduct investigations at midnight without warrants. They didn't show up at random homes demanding papers. "What investigation? Do you have a warrant? What's your probable cause for being at my home?" The questions landed like accusations. Corbin's jaw tightened visibly. In his years with ICE, he'd grown accustomed to a particular dynamic. He demanded, people complied. Fear was efficient. Fear worked. But Tina wasn't afraid. She was exhausted, increasingly annoyed, and acutely aware that something illegal was happening on her doorstep. "I don't need to explain myself to you," Corbin snapped. "You're required to provide documentation when a federal agent requests it." "That's not accurate." Tina's response was immediate, precise. "Under the Fourth Amendment, you need probable cause or a warrant to enter my home or demand documentation. Do you have either?" The question hung in the night air between them. Behind Corbin, a neighbor's motion sensor light flickered on, then off. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice and fell silent. Corbin's expression shifted from frustration to something darker. He'd been challenged before, but usually by people who didn't understand the law, who couldn't articulate their rights with such clarity. This woman knew exactly what she was talking about, and that made her dangerous to his authority. "You people," he began, his voice dropping to something more menacing, "always think you know the law." The phrase landed with the weight Corbin intended, though not the effect. "You people." Two words that stripped away any pretense of legitimate law enforcement and revealed the truth beneath. Tina's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Not fear, recognition. She understood exactly what was happening now. "I was born in this country, Agent." She paused, waiting for him to identify himself. He didn't. "I'm a registered nurse. I've been at work for 12 hours saving lives. I'm going to close this door now, and if you have legitimate business, you can return with a warrant." Her hand moved toward the door. Corbin's moved faster. He reached for the door handle, his fingers wrapping around the metal as he pulled against the security chain. The hardware rattled, but held firm. "You're obstructing a federal investigation. That's a felony. I can arrest you right now." The doorbell camera captured everything. His hand on her door, the illegal attempt at entry, the threat of arrest without cause. Every second was recorded in high definition with clear audio. "You're attempting an illegal entry," Tina said, her voice rising for the first time. Not with fear, with anger. "I'm recording this interaction, and I'm going to call 911 if you don't leave my property." Corbin released the door and pulled out his phone. If she wanted recordings, he'd make his own. He held it up, pointing it at her through the gap in the door. "The subject is refusing to comply with a federal agent's lawful orders," he spoke into his phone's camera, his voice taking on an official tone. "The subject appears to be concealing identity and may be harboring undocumented individuals." Tina's calm cracked completely. "I'm not concealing anything. I'm a black woman standing in my own home that my grandmother's family has owned since 1962. I'm exercising my constitutional rights. You need to leave. Now." But Corbin had already made his decision. He was calling for backup. 10 minutes felt like an eternity. Tina remained at her door, the chain still latched, watching through the narrow opening as Corbin paced her front walkway like a predator circling prey. He spoke into his radio twice, his words too low for her to hear clearly, but his agitation was obvious. She used the time to ensure her phone was recording from inside, a backup to the doorbell camera. Every angle is documented. Every word is preserved. When the vehicles arrived, they came without sirens but with lights, 2 ICE SUVs and an Atlanta Police Department cruiser. The doorbell camera captured all of it. 2 additional ICE agents emerging from their vehicles with practiced efficiency, and Sergeant Maria Rodriguez stepping out of the patrol car with an expression that suggested she already knew this call was going to be problematic. Corbin immediately launched into an animated explanation, his hands gesturing toward Tina's door, his voice carrying across the quiet street. The 2 backup ICE agents exchanged glances that the camera caught clearly, confusion mixed with something that might have been concern. Rodriguez listened for perhaps 30 seconds before her expression shifted to undisguised skepticism. She held up one hand, cutting Corbin off mid-sentence. "Let me understand this correctly," she said, her voice carrying the particular tone of someone who'd dealt with federal overreach before. "You knocked on someone's door at midnight without a warrant and demanded citizenship papers?" "She's refusing to cooperate," Corbin insisted. She could be a citizen exercising her rights," Rodriguez interrupted, already moving toward the door. Behind her, one of the ICE agents pulled out his phone, likely documenting the scene for very different reasons than Corbin intended. Rodriguez approached Tina's door with her hands clearly visible, her badge held up. "Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Rodriguez with Atlanta PD. I apologize for this disturbance." She shot a glance back at Corbin that could have melted steel. Rodriguez's voice carried a warmth that stood in stark contrast to Corbin's aggression. "Ma'am, you're not required to show these agents anything without a warrant. Do you feel threatened by this interaction?" Tina's response was immediate and clear. "Yes, this agent has been trying to force entry into my home. He grabbed my door handle and pulled on it. He's made threats of arrest without probable cause. I want him off my property." Rodriguez turned slowly, and the doorbell camera captured the complete transformation of her demeanor. The warmth vanished, replaced by official authority. "Agent Corbin, you need to leave this property immediately, before this becomes an incident that requires my formal report." Corbin's face flushed darker. "This is a federal matter. You don't have jurisdiction here." "I have jurisdiction over attempted illegal entry in my city," Rodriguez countered, her hand moving to rest on her belt near her radio. "I have jurisdiction over threats made against a resident in her own home. And I absolutely have jurisdiction over someone who's about to create a civil rights lawsuit that will cost my city money when she names everyone present. Leave. Now. Or I will escort you from this property myself and file a report that will be on your supervisor's desk by morning." The two backup ICE agents had already begun retreating toward their vehicles. One of them called out, "Corbin, let's go. This isn't what we signed up for." But Corbin couldn't let it end there. Men who build careers on unchecked authority rarely know when to stop. He took 2 steps back, then turned to face Tina's door one final time. "We'll be watching this address," he said, his voice carrying clearly to both cameras recording the scene. "If you're hiding anyone, we'll find out. People like you always slip up eventually." The threat hung in the air. Rodriguez's hand was already reaching for her radio when Corbin finally walked to his vehicle and drove away. Tina stood at her door for a full minute after the street emptied, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Tina didn't sleep that night. She watched the doorbell camera footage 17 times, taking notes on timestamps, statements, and the exact sequence of events. At 3 a.m., she emailed the video file to herself, to her cloud storage, and to 3 trusted friends with instructions on what to do if anything happened to her. At 6 a.m., she called Phil Brown, an attorney with the Southern Coalition for Social Justice she'd worked with on immigration cases. By noon, they'd filed an official complaint with ICE's Office of Professional Responsibility. By the end of the week, the doorbell footage had gone viral. It started with local Atlanta news, then jumped to national networks. The image of Corbin's face in the camera, the audio of his "You People" comment, and Tina's calm assertion of her rights became a cultural flashpoint. Within 5 days, the video had been viewed 47 million times across various platforms. The public response forced action. The Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General announced a formal investigation into Agent Raymond Corbin's conduct. What they found was damning. Corbin's community sweeps had no authorization whatsoever. He'd been conducting racial profiling operations on his own initiative, targeting predominantly Black and Hispanic neighborhoods based on nothing more than demographics. His activity logs showed a pattern. Late-night visits to homes in specific zip codes, always without warrants, always with demands for documentation. His personnel file told an even darker story. 17 complaints in 3 years, all from Black and Hispanic residents, all describing similar encounters. Every single complaint had been dismissed without investigation. Some had been closed within 24 hours of filing. News organizations filed FOIA requests that revealed the scope. 42 unauthorized home visits in the past year alone. Official reports claimed the subjects refused to provide documentation when Corbin had never possessed legal grounds to demand it. The warrant he'd referenced to Tina? It had never existed. None of his warrants had. The investigation also uncovered something that would prove crucial. Corbin had been recording his own encounters, but those recordings had mysteriously disappeared from evidence storage. Only the incidents where his targets had their own recordings, like Tina's doorbell camera, could be verified. Tina sat in the CNN studio, composed despite the bright lights and 3 cameras pointed at her. The host had just played the doorbell footage for a national audience. When they cut back to the interview, Tina didn't cry or rage. She simply explained, in the same measured tone she'd used at her door, exactly which constitutional violations had occurred and why they mattered. The Fourth Amendment isn't a suggestion, she said. It's not something that applies only when convenient for law enforcement. Agent Corbin had no warrant, no probable cause, and no legal authority to demand anything from me. But beyond the legal issues, think about what this represents. He targeted my home at midnight because he made assumptions about who belonged in that neighborhood. That's not law enforcement. That's harassment under color of authority. Legal experts lined up across news networks to affirm her analysis. Constitutional scholars called the incident a textbook case of Fourth Amendment violations. Civil rights organizations rallied to her cause, with the ACLU announcing they'd file an amicus brief in any resulting lawsuit. Corbin was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Then the discovery process began revealing the systemic failures that had enabled him. Email chains told the story. One supervisor's message to another read, "Let him do his thing. Numbers are what matter." Another showed a complaint being dismissed with the comment, "No corroboration. The subject is probably illegal anyway." The department had prioritized enforcement statistics over constitutional compliance, creating an environment where agents like Corbin could operate with complete impunity. Phil Brown filed the comprehensive lawsuit 3 months after the midnight encounter. The defendants, Agent Raymond Corbin, and the United States Department of Homeland Security. The claims: violations of Fourth Amendment rights, racial profiling, intentional infliction of emotional distress, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to deprive civil rights under color of federal law. The government filed a motion to dismiss, arguing sovereign immunity. The federal judge denied it in a 23-page opinion that included phrases like flagrant disregard for constitutional protections and institutional indifference to civil rights violations that rises to the level of deliberate indifference. The settlement negotiations took place over 4 months in a conference room in downtown Atlanta. The government's attorneys knew they couldn't win at trial. Not with the doorbell footage, not with Corbin's personnel file, and certainly not with the email evidence showing supervisory knowledge and encouragement of constitutional violations. 18 months after that midnight knock, the settlement was announced, $6.7 million. But the money was only the beginning of the consequences. Agent Raymond Corbin was terminated from federal service with prejudice, permanently barred from any future law enforcement position. The state of Georgia filed criminal charges, attempted illegal entry, making false statements in official reports, and deprivation of rights under color of law. His attorneys negotiated a plea agreement, but his career was over. The Department of Homeland Security implemented sweeping reforms. Mandatory body cameras for all ICE agents conducting field operations, with footage automatically uploaded to secure servers that supervisors couldn't access or delete. A civilian oversight board to review all complaints, removing the internal investigation process that had failed 17 times. Comprehensive retraining on constitutional limitations of enforcement authority, with annual recertification requirements. 3 supervisors in Corbin's chain of command were demoted and transferred. The Atlanta District Office was placed under direct oversight from Washington, with a federal monitor assigned to review operations for 2 years. Corbin's final court appearance was brief. He sat silently as the judge accepted his plea agreement. 5 years probation, 200 hours of community service teaching constitutional rights, and a permanent felony conviction on his record. No jail time, but consequences that would follow him forever. Every background check would show it. Every job application would require explanation. Every Google search of his name would surface the doorbell footage, now viewed over 100 million times worldwide, taught in law schools and police academies as the definitive example of how not to conduct law enforcement. Tina stood on the courthouse steps 6 weeks after the settlement, surrounded by supporters holding signs reading "Constitutional Rights Matter" and "Accountability Now." Media cameras from 17 news organizations pointed at her, waiting for her statement. She'd thought carefully about what to say. This moment wasn't about her anymore. It had never really been about her alone. It was about every person who'd experienced what she experienced but didn't have a doorbell camera, didn't know their rights, didn't have the resources to fight back. This was never about revenge, she began, her voice carrying across the plaza. This was about accountability. This was about making sure that no one else has to experience what I experienced. The terror of being targeted in your own home for nothing more than the color of your skin. If my 15 minutes of viral fame can change the system even slightly, then every second of that midnight encounter was worth it. She'd used a portion of the settlement to establish the Constitutional Defense Fund, providing legal representation for residents who experienced similar violations. In its first year, the fund would handle 43 cases across 7 states, winning settlements in 39 of them. Tina continued her work at Atlanta Memorial Hospital, still pulling 12-hour trauma shifts, still saving lives. But she'd added a new role, national advocate for reforming immigration enforcement practices. She spoke at law schools, testified before congressional committees, and trained community organizations on constitutional rights. The doorbell camera footage became required viewing in police academies and ICE training programs, a case study in the catastrophic consequences of assumptions and unchecked authority. The camera itself remained installed at her home, still recording, still watching. A silent sentinel and a reminder that in the age of technology, truth could no longer be buried in dismissed complaints and missing evidence files. Justice, when denied in the moment, could still be served in the light of day. And sometimes, that justice arrived on the doorstep of those who thought themselves immune to consequences, captured in crystalline clarity by a device installed to prevent package theft.